welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you on PTV WORLD. On this show, we will be talking about two very important issues. The first is with reference to Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to China. We also discussed this in a previous segment as well, where we spoke about how the Prime Minister intends to visit China regarding urban planning. There has also been a development with regards to the Chinese Investment Business Forum, where, of course, more emphasis is being laid on increasing exports and increasing industrialization in the country. In the same aspect, we know that the Prime Minister has also ordered the removal of bottlenecks, red tape hindrances in bringing Chinese investment to Pakistan. About 37 regulations have been removed, which are hindrances to bringing foreign investment in Pakistan. As well as that, the annual APCA Sustainable Development Report 2021 was also launched yesterday by the Pakistan-China Institute and the All Pakistan Chinese Enterprises Association. And this, of course, has about 100 Chinese companies. And this report is going to be serving the purpose of bringing forward the facts and also nullifying any sort of fictitious statements that arise. It's going to be an important development with regards to enhancing our bilateral and trade relationship with Chinese investors and bringing in more investors in the country and creating a business-friendly environment for the Chinese investors here. In the same spirit, Prime Minister Imran Khan will be visiting China in February, and all of these issues are going to be discussed in further detail. What more can be done in terms of bringing together the Chinese investors, other foreign investors, how these 37 regulations or other red tape hindrances are going to be removed, what sort of impact it's going to have on the mechanisms of bringing in the investment in Pakistan. We're going to discuss all of these issues in further detail in our show. We will also be taking a look at the story regarding Kazakhstan, the protests in Kazakhstan, which were fueled by a price hike in fuel prices, has, of course, now turned into a much wider protest, which may reflect a larger discontent that the population of Kazakhstan experienced with the government there. We know that the president has also issued a state of emergency, and the situation has also turned violent in some parts of the country. We also know that Russian involvement is also a potential involvement in the situation, and the European Union has warned that Russia must be respecting the Kazakhstan's sovereignty as it gets more involved in the situation. What exactly is the issue at the moment? What sort of political involvement is there, or what sort of issues actually led to this wider discontent in Kazakhstan and the conditions that the people are suffering there? What sort of expectations they have with their government? And in the future, what role are the foreign powers going to be playing in the current situation that's going on in Kazakhstan? We'll discuss all of that in further detail in the show. For the first segment, we will be joined by our expert, but of course, for that, in our studios, we have Mr. Farrukh Pitafi back with us. He's well and looks good. Thank you, Farrukh, for being with us, and good to see you. And of course, Mr. Raja Faisal is also with us. We've also been joined by Mr. Omar Kareem, who's Research Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. He's joined us on Skype. Thank you very much, Mr. Omar, for being with us today. When we speak about the Chinese investment, of course, this is an important relationship to Pakistan, and any sort of foreign investment is vital for business in the country and to improve our economic situation. A big problem, of course, are the red tape hindrances or the regulatory problems that our investors experience. The Prime Minister has ordered a removal of those 37 regulations in particular. Do you think that these regulations will be easy to remove in the first place? And if so, how do they help in bringing in more Chinese investment or other foreign investment in Pakistan? Mr. Omar.
Thank you so much. I think that it's important that both sides are meeting and communicating with each other, and I think that the removal of these hindrances, it's really important, as you suggested, but it should have happened maybe years ago, or it should have happened before the start of this whole project. As we say that, in a way, a Pakistani state, when it went ahead with this project and the Chinese investment started coming in and China became an active partner in terms of CPEC, the Pakistani state should have been more aware of all of these, you can say, bottlenecks and operationalization, you can say operational lacunas which were there within our state structure and our political structure as well. So in one way, it's really good that these bottlenecks and these issues have been identified and now they have been removed. But on the other hand, we also need to see whether in practical terms this will give some dividends, and also whether this will create an atmosphere where the Chinese investors and different Chinese firms, they feel confident enough to go to invest more and more in Pakistan. And also the investment needs to be, you can say, diversified. Right now we have seen most of the investment coming into the infrastructure sector and also power sector. In these sectors, the investment has really produced some good, you can say, output. But it has to be diversified more. And also the crucial thing would be how much more investment can be actually diverted to Gwadar and industrial zone in Gwadar, because we haven't seen much, you can say, industrial development happening within Gwadar, which was supposed to be the crown of CPEC projects.
Right, of course. But my question was with regards to if whether or not these removal of these hindrances and of course moving towards a one-window operation will be an easy process, or do you think that this is going to be taking a lot of time, or a lot of nuances and measures are going to be involved in actually achieving that, or do you think it's pretty straightforward?
No, I don't think so. It will be really straightforward. I think that no, the crucial thing here is getting the confidence of investors. And when we talk about these bottlenecks, it's not only about the Chinese but also other investors. And also, you can. It's actually good that the Prime Minister himself is going, because that will
Yeah.
improve the political communication on this crucial issue as well, which may have had ups and downs in the past. So, with the political side or the political communication right on spot, I think that this will really improve. Alongside the removal of these bottlenecks, chances
All
for
right.
greater investment.
Right. Faisal, when we look forward to the Prime Minister's visit to China, we of course earlier also discussed them and numerous issues that he wants to take up, and of course overall strengthen our bilateral relationship with China. But in terms of actual outcomes, what can we hope to come out of this visit?
I think, Sana, this time the hopes are very high, and I think they would be met as well. See, we have to look at it from a different angle this time. Why I say this? Because this is a very important time of the visit of Prime Minister of Pakistan to China. Why? Because if we look at the region, of course we have on the eastern border India, and India is already getting favors from the Americans in terms of their bilateral trade, in terms of the investments which Americans are making in India to improve their economy. And the latest latest indicators are that even the Britain as well as the European countries, they are thinking about investing in India. Why? Because everyone is considering Indians as being the front line against China. And I think this is the very time that China needs to understand this as well. Chinese government, they need to promote invest in Pakistan idea in their own country as well. It's not only Pakistan that should go there and make efforts to bring the investment in Pakistan. I think they need to understand that if Pakistan has made the bitter preferences for themselves, then it is because of China, it is because of the friendship of China, it is because of Pakistan's going from strategic depth to the economic depth. Pakistan is moving towards it, and I think China needs to look into it. And when this time Prime Minister of Pakistan is visiting China, then Chinese, they need to look at it from a different prism as well. They need to look at it from a different angle. They need to look at it through whatever is going on in the region in terms of two fronts for India, in terms of India getting favors from the Americans.
Aren't they already doing that?
Uh, to some extent, I think there are certain avenues still they are lacking behind in terms of, obviously, as Pakistan is simply looking to improve its economy, because everything revolves around economy, and economy can only be made better once we start getting the FDIs and investments from other countries. And I think China is a country that I think needs to invest more in Pakistan.
All right, Farrukh, the Sustainable Development Report 2021 came out, and this was an important development, and it involved a lot of Chinese investors and companies as well. What sort of contribution does this report make in the overall enhancement of Chinese investment in Pakistan?
Right. Before I do that, let me first thank both of you for remembering me yesterday. I was watching the television, even though I was a bit sick, and I was grateful that you remembered me.
Of
right?
course.
Regarding what you asked before that, I think I have a little bit to contribute to both the questions you put to the other guests. If you allow me, Sana,
Sure.
can I also take on those questions?
As usual.
Yeah, no, but because I think I have some perspectives
Absolutely.
here. Regarding Pakistan's, complications when it comes to duties and all those, red tapes, Pakistan and India both actually inhabited a colonial or post-colonial infrastructure where everything was very complicated. One, there is the problem of three tiers of government, and then there are multiple, duties. And that's why, precisely why we had this CPEC authority, that it is going to simplify all the tariff regimes, right? All these distortions from Pakistan side and China's side will be taken care of when you progress in coming days. Regarding what you were asking, or Faisal was saying about India versus China, I am perhaps most notorious in busting all these meta-narratives that there is a Cold War between America and China. I don't believe that is true. Whether India is capable of being frontline against China, I don't believe that is possible either. China and India have been confronting each other on the border, but simultaneously their volume of trade has increased, and it has increased substantially. So I think that in coming days, people who keep on thinking that we are somehow living between 1940s and 1990s, they have to actually wake up to the reality that we are living in the 21st century. And in that reality, there is so much interdependence that while we keep on trying to actually one up each other, we will be working together. When the Prime Minister of Pakistan goes to China, I'm sure that he will be building more, commonality, more focus on Pakistan-China relationship. I think that this term, Iron Brothers, is actually epitome of what we are, and we are going to work together. But don't think for a second that China and the US are competing values, that India somehow can compensate for China, because while China has now its own economic blues because of Evergrande and other crises that we have seen of late, but India's economic problems are so big. If later on, when we are going to actually discuss that, if you ask me, I'm going to explain why India's economy is actually teetering on the brink.
Right, but there's also the Strategic Competition Act, which was passed by the U.S. Senate, in which the U.S. has allocated about $300 million for continuing China, for countering China influence fund. There are other such measures that are also being taken by, as Faisal mentioned, by different countries in the world as well. Mr. Umar, when we look at such an initiative that is coming from the U.S. side in terms of investment for a particular purpose, don't we see that there is a counter investment in economic terms, at least, that is going on in terms of containing China?
Yeah, you're right. I think I partially agree with what Pitafi Saab said, that India will take some time to reach that level. But definitely, India has successfully sold itself as the counterweight to China, and this is the reason why most of things, political happenings within India, they are actually being ignored by Western states, by US and broader European states coalitions, and their trade volume is increasing exponentially. But there is one thing which is very interesting from a Pakistani perspective, and that is that most of these states, like US or Australia, for instance, or Japan, they want Indian contribution in the Indo-Pacific. But from an Indian perspective, Indian energy comes from you can say West Asia, or for Indian perspective, Western Indian Ocean is equally more important. So India, in return, is trying these nations to cooperate with India, and also to include India in security regimes in the Western Indian Ocean. So this is a sort of a point of, you can say, disjoint between the two sides. So India has a utility in the Indo-Pacific, and the Western nations, or the anti-China bloc, you can say, they are trying to get India into that. But India simultaneously wants itself to be made more relevant in the security infrastructure of West Asia, and also, you can say, Western Indian Ocean. And it's actually a strong point for Pakistan, because Pakistan is already quite well integrated into the security infrastructure of Western Indian Ocean, because it is part of the coalition maritime force, which is very active in the Gulf of Oman and Persian Gulf regions, and certain other initiatives which are actually Western initiatives. So
All
this
right.
is a point of, you can say, an Indian perspective onto this, that it wants
Right.
equally
Yes,
to
Farrukh,
be
you want to
equally
add
relevant.
something?
Right. A very interesting aspect, because you have actually mentioned the allocations by the US. Please note that there are a couple of things that are happening simultaneously. One, I don't know whether any of you have read Kai-Fu Lee's AI Superpowers. That is a Battalion book which actually talks about artificial intelligence competition by the great powers, right? It is a Battalion book. And it tells you how China has been having an edge over the West because of its own internal facial recognition software and other things.
Okay.
So what Facebook did was to go to India and create a kind of, with their local companies, they have created this initiative where they are going to actually, even though data will be anonymized, they will be actually mining data to train their own AI, right? So in that kind of fields, there is going to be competition. But when Donald Trump was ruling America, at that time something very interesting happened. He tried to actually decouple China and America, and in the end it created the superconductor shortages all over the world. So let me be very honest. I don't think that this thing is going anywhere. They will keep on shoring up India's capacity, but the fact is that when Manmohan Singh actually opened the economy, first who came, investors came, and the economy had a buoyancy. Then came the creditors, they kept on lending. A lot of companies borrowed because we believe in Bhedchal, and that actually collapsed. And now the current Indian government, its job, because it has been brought in by Tatas and Birlas and Ambanis and Adanis. Their job is to keep on hiding all the non-performing assets behind all the visible economic boom. So India, the kind of state its economy is in, I don't think it can compete with China at all.
Right. We're almost out of time for this segment. Mr. Umar, anything you want to add before we say thank you?
I'll just add something which I heard from Mr. Jaishankar when he was not actually the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, and he said that Indian infrastructure will take almost 2 decades to rival that of China, and that in itself is an admission that how behind India is right now as compared to China, and how much time it will take for India to reach the Chinese level of economic development.
Right.
I just wanted to add something. Earlier, as we saw that Brother Umar was talking about the Western Indian Ocean, I think he's right to every extent. Why I say this? Because India has obviously Chabahar kind of things going on in the Gulf, and then we need to keenly look at Narwane's visit, General Narwane's visit of December 2020. It was very important, of Saudi Arabia and UAE, and in between 2 days, for 2 days he wasn't there. He was in Tel Aviv meeting someone very important. So this shows that of course they want to have that, and he's right about it, and they only want to have it for one reason, I must say, and that is to counter CPAC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Umar Kareem, for being a part of the show and for continuing our discussion. We have to move on to the next segment, but yes.
Can I add one thing? This whole idea of actually this country working with that country to counter the third thing, you know, here's simple logic. What do countries do? They have to actually pursue their own interest. If fight or confrontation is going to benefit them, they might actually go for it. But if cooperation helps them, then they should actually go for the cooperation.
Can we
Working with
expect
China,
that sanity from India?
I do.
I just want to add a counter argument to it.
You didn't let me finish my argument.
Okay, Farrukh, go ahead.
Farrukh,
So the only humble submission is that in the end, China, working with China helps every country in the world. So why would they actually in the end end up countering it? As far as Tel Aviv is concerned, or Jerusalem for that matter, I think Israel is working very closely with China.
Yes, Faisal.
Yeah, even J-10s are designed from the Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention here, you know why I say this, because if Indians are cooperating, or Indians are cooperating in terms of defense with the Middle Eastern countries, there is another reason, and that too against CPAC, because even they have question marks over Gwadar. Because Gwadar is at the opening of the Gulf, and of course we know that in past they had question marks.
Right, and Faisal and Sana, by the way, while they might have actually concerns about Gwadar, let me remind you, right now they are worried only about one flyover in Indian Punjab.
Oh yes,
where for 20 minutes their Prime Minister was stranded.
And let me add something else as well. You know why he was traveling by the road? The only reason is because we know that last month, of course, their CDS, he had that unfortunate, whatever it was, incident. And now, of course, Modi is trying to avoid, on a rainy day, trying to avoid that kind of incident.
And brilliant thing is, whosoever stranded him actually made him lame sitting duck on a flyover, the most exposed structure anywhere, for 20 minutes.
All right, now let's move on to our next segment, which is regarding the situation in Kazakhstan. We have a short report prepared on it. Let's take a look at that before we introduce our guests.
Protests started in Almaty, the largest city in Kazakhstan, due to a sharp rise in oil prices. These protests escalated quickly as President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev sacked the government and declared a 2-day nationwide state of emergency. Troops from a Russian-headed military alliance of former Soviet states have also been invited into Kazakhstan by President Tokayev to help restore order. Although the protests were triggered due to rising fuel prices, they have now morphed into anti-government riots due to resentment of more than 3 decades of rule by ex-President Nur-Sultan Nazarbayev. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is his hand-picked successor. There have been scattered reports of violence, including civilians and police officials' deaths. Reports have also indicated that the presidential palace had been set on fire. This is the worst series of protests in Kazakhstan's 30-year-long history.
Well, you heard what's going on in Kazakhstan. To discuss this further, we have been joined online by Mr. Andrei Kurtanov, who is the Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. Thank you very much for being a part of the debate. We're trying and establishing contact with Mr. Andrei Kurtanov, and as soon as he joins us on the show, we're going to welcome him. This, of course, is a developing story as to what is going on in Kazakhstan, but it is an important one, and we need to maybe dig in deeper as to the reasons of why this protest first even took place. Faisal, we know that the initial trigger, of course, course, was the rise in fuel prices. But of course, the kind of scale that we are seeing at the moment points towards a much wider discontent that the public has been experiencing.
Yeah, I think it has everything to do with the previous president, who still is considered as the main man behind the whole power of the country. He's been obviously clinging onto three top positions, and number one was there only one party system in that country, and he was obviously chairperson of that party. Then he was president of the country as well. And then I'm talking about Nur Sultan. And Nur Sultan was the very man who was actually the chairman of the National Security Council as well. So what had happened 2 years ago was that he resigned from the presidency, but he kept on clinging on the other two. And people on ground, they were protesting against him, and even in few of the protest sites, people have started going away as soon as they came to know about this, that Nur Sultan has been removed from rest of the two positions as well. And now that's why they've been claiming that now once he has gone, the position is clear, and they have started going back to their homes. And I think every problem, the deep-rooted problem is that country was progressing in terms of its alliances internationally and its international face, its GDP. Everything was perfect, going perfect. But on ground, people were obviously concerned about the way people are being treated in that country, and of course their rights, the delivery of rights to the people, it wasn't made sure. And I think they considered Nur Sultan to be more like a dictator rather than a leader.
Right, and of course, when we talk about the country, we also know that the country has a lot of oil reserves, has a lot of mineral wealth, but despite that, there were a lot of poor living conditions that the general public faced, and perhaps the attention, as you were saying, Faisal, was not given at the domestic front. But when we are in the situation that we are in right now, Farrukh, whatever the reason may be as to how this actually started off, can we actually expect something to come out of this protests which results in a change of governance, in a change of the system and the way things are working, or will this just be faded away or just put down?
Right, and Sana, that is a billion-dollar question. Remember that when you talk about Kazakhstan, you'll have to actually understand its importance. It is the largest landlocked country in the world. Right, true. It is also the 9th largest territorially country that is actually bordering two very important countries, Russia and China. Right, so it's important, and when it got independence, it was armed to teeth with nukes that were Soviet nukes, and it worked so closely with the Russia that they took away all the nuclear, installations, and now they are free of it. But their economic situation, as was rightly pointed out by Faisal, and if you have traveled or if you travel within Central Asian republics, you realize one thing, that while the rich have grown very rich and the countries and their economies might be doing well, the poor have remained really poor.
Right.
The facades, the Soviet building facades are great, but when you go behind them, when you go to average or lower class hotels, you are astonished that they are really hollow, right? So there was expectation of this kind of disruption, but who's going to take advantage? Whether it is going to be a Western-led reform or whether it is going to be Russia, we'll see.
Absolutely. Let us introduce our guests in the show as well. Mr. Andrei Kortunov, the Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. He has joined us online. We've also been joined by Mr. Khalid Taimur Akram, who is the Executive Director, Center for Global and Strategic Studies. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the show and taking out the time. We, of course, are discussing the developing situation in Kazakhstan and trying to understand why the country is where it is today and the kind of expectations that the people may have from from the government. But of course, in the aftermath of the kind of uncertainty that we're experiencing right now, there is of course the issue of the involvement of other powers and how they're going to react to the situation in Kazakhstan as well. Mr. Kortonov, when we see that perhaps peacekeeping forces led by a Russian military alliance may be sent to help the situation in Kazakhstan, and the kind of influence that is possible for other powers to be involved in such a situation is always a possibility. Do we see that maybe there is a possibility of hijacking the sovereignty of Kazakhstan by the Russian forces?
Well, first of all, these are not Russian forces. These are multilateral forces by a group of countries, including Russia, but also some countries from Central Asia, Belarus, and even South Caucasus. Second, I think that as far as Mr. Putin is concerned, political stability in Kazakhstan is one of his prime objectives. I don't think that he has many issues to be resolved from Mr. Tokayev. I think these two guys understand each other pretty well. And Kazakhstan has never challenged the Russian strategic hegemony in Central Asia. That's why it has always been a very comfortable partner for the Russian Federation and for Mr. Putin personally. So I don't think that there is any intention to change the status quo. There is rather an intention to maintain status quo for as long as possible, because this is something that suits Putin's interests quite well.
Right, Mr. Khalid, when we say that the status quo is what is being looked at in terms of that actually moving on in the future as well, then this is of course something that perhaps the people, the protesters out on the streets right now don't really want to see. They of course are there out on the streets for a particular change, a change in the way that they live in the country, and a change in the way that they're governed. Can we see that in the coming days, in the aftermath of such protests, it can be scaled up to a level where they want to see a change in the government, a change in the way that the political scenario in Kazakhstan exists as of today?
Yes, you're right over here. First of all, we have to see that why these protests have gone out of hand and why these protests are shifting to the other cities. I must make it clear over here that these protests are headless protests because there is no leader of these protests, and they started from a very small city and in one region where the prices of the liquid petroleum gas LPG were raised from the current price to plus of 0.12 US dollars. And then these protests, they started from one area and then quickly they spread over to Almaty and to the other cities, and people came out on the streets, and all of a sudden people with weapons, they came out on the streets, started putting buildings on fire. And the astonishing thing is that these are the leaderless and headless protests, which shows that it is a classic example of using fifth generation warfare against this country. And I totally agree with my colleague from Russia that the forces which are deployed over there are not some extraordinary forces. They are part of a comprehensive treaty organization, SESTO, which is already signed not only by Kazakhstan but by all the countries. I feel that all the countries, the Central Asian countries, I feel that it is connected to the situation in Ukraine because US is putting a lot of pressures on Russia on the Ukraine issue. And as we know that Kazakhstan is one of the closest allies in Russia in that region. And now this fifth generation warfare is being placed over there in Kazakhstan, and now people are out on the streets. It's a way that by putting, they are putting pressure on Kazakhstan, and it is an indirect pressure on Russia.
Right. Dr. Kortonov, while you were talking about status quo and how it can change, or perhaps it is not going to change, we are talking about three situations. One is, of course, the regional balance the other one is who is actually ruling the country, and the third one is the economic order, where the rich might be getting richer, the poor might be getting poorer. Let us talk about the third one. Is there a possibility that all this kind of disruptions can eventually evolve into a situation where you have more just economic order in the country?
Well, we can only hope that the current leadership of Kazakhstan will somehow accelerate pending economic reforms, because indeed there are major discrepancies in the real incomes between the regions of Kazakhstan and also between various social groups. Many people believe that the system is not completely fair, that they do not get what they are entitled to get, and that creates a lot of tension in the society. On top of that, of course, we should not forget about the coronavirus pandemic, which closed some economic and social opportunities for many people, especially many people living outside of large metropolitan areas. So that added to the tensions in the society, and partially that is the reason why people went into the streets. So a lot now depends on the position taken by the leadership of the country. People want change. I think that it is natural that after 30 years of basically a single leader rule, they want to have something different. They want to have more presence in the government. They want to have more social mobility. And it is difficult right now for Kazakhstan because I think that if you take macroeconomic situation there, things are likely to get worse before they get better. Since if they move along the market reforms, then prices on some basic commodities for the population and prices on the food stock, on energy, on basic medicines might go up. Also, there is a major concern about potential unemployment. If you start structural changes in the economy of the country, unemployment is doomed to get higher. So there are no easy solutions for Kazakhstan, and we can only hope that the leadership will be wise enough to somehow smoothen these social problems which are likely to emerge in any case.
Mr. Kotanov, you know, but you've earlier mentioned and rightly mentioned that, of course, President Tokayev, he's the one who actually asked for the help from a collective security treaty organization, which, of course, Kazakhstan is a member of. And the forces which has actually entered in Kazakhstan, they are from different other countries, and they are there to maintain the peace. But we understand that around 20% of the population of Kazakhstan is ethnically Russian, and in coming days, if something goes wrong related to that particular ethnicity of Kazakhstan, do you think that Russia would be further enhancing its role in Kazakhstan, number one? And number two, I just wanted to ask, could this treaty organization come up with some kind of the political solution to it? Why? Because of course if they can send the troops in, and looking at the facts that even the opposition don't have any leaders, and there's only one leader who is the president of Kazakhstan right now, and even of course he has question marks in front of the protesters. Do you think that this treaty organization can come up with a political solution to it?
Well, let me try to respond to the two questions. First of all, in terms of the Russian community in Kazakhstan, indeed, it is a significant part of the overall population of the country. And from time to time, there are some conflicts, not major conflicts, but still some. But in this particular case, if you look at the protests in Kazakhstan these days, I don't think that there is a major ethnic component to the unrest in Kazakhstan. I don't think it's about ethnicity. It's rather about social problems. And we can hope that the ethnic situation in Kazakhstan will not deteriorate and that the power in Kazakhstan will not be seized by radical nationalists like it happened in Ukraine, for example, when they decided to marginalize or even to ban the Russian language. I don't think that we will see anything like that in Kazakhstan anytime soon. In terms of the political solution, I wouldn't really overestimate the role of this military assistance to Kazakhstan. They can probably protect some governmental buildings. They can probably go after international terrorists if such terrorists are identified in Kazakhstan. But in the end of the day, any political solution should be homemade. It should be generated in a dialogue between state and society in Kazakhstan. And I think what the country really needs is a new social contract. And I don't think that any external power, be it Russia or Central Asian countries or China or the West, can come up with a ready solution. The solution has to be found in Kazakhstan itself.
Right. Mr. Khalid, back in 2011, in an oil workers' strike, a police fatally shot about 15 protesters. And this was a big development in Kazakhstan and the way that protests were dealt with. Of course, at the moment, this protest, of course, with reference to the presidential palace and other important buildings being set on fire, needs to be curtailed. But do you think that the possibility of a massive operation being launched in terms of curtailing the protesters, we know thousands have been arrested and been taken into custody already, can be done, and perhaps the important issues that the people actually face in Kazakhstan will be put on the back burner?
And can you also dilate upon what you were saying earlier regarding fifth generation warfare?
Yes, first of all, I would just say that the situation in Kazakhstan, yes, it is right now out of the control of the security forces over there, and that is why the CSTO force is deployed over there, and hopefully the situation will come under control because of two reasons. Number one, as I have said before, that this complete movement is not controlled by any single person. There is no leader of the movement. The people have come out on the street basing on the material which they have been seeing on the social media. As in Pakistan, we have also been facing the fifth generation warfare. So it is a classic example of fifth generation warfare. Yes, Kazakhstan, since last 30 years, this is the third time Kazakhstan is facing these kinds of riots. They saw the riots in 2000 era, and then in 2019 there were another kind of riots, and this is the third time that these riots are there. But these are quite intense, and especially during the holiday seasons, because normally I have been to Kazakhstan and I have seen that in the holiday season, most of the Kazakh people, they go to their villages and they go to their places, and the weather is very much extreme. So people coming out in this extreme weather is quite an unusual thing. Yes, economic situation is quite deteriorating over there, and due to the pandemic, the situation got more worse. The president has dismissed the government. But we must,
sorry to cut you. You were talking about social media. Can you identify the companies that might be actually being used there? Is it Facebook or something else?
It is not one company. If you just go and see the Twitter trend, yesterday night the Kazakhstan was on the highest of the Twitter trends. There were many Western media sites. There are few media sites which are being run from Prague, from Czech Republic, some Eurasian radios, some other sites which have been instigating people to come out. And I would still say that it is basically happening to put pressure on Russia because of the Russian involvement in Ukraine. So now pressure has come on Russia because Kazakhstan holds majority of Russian bases, and Kazakhstan also is a key point where the Russian all satellite and missile bases are located in Kazakhstan. So for Russia, Kazakhstan holds a very important position, and Russia cannot afford a destabilized Kazakhstan. So in my opinion, the situation in Kazakhstan will get under control in next 2 to 3 days, as the president has already dismissed the government, and he has announced a lot of reforms, and they are increasing the pays of the people, of the government servants, and the food prices have come down in last 2 days. So the Kazakh government is quite hopeful that situation will get under control in next 2 to 3 days.
Right, Mr. Kortanov, when we speak about how the protests did not start with the leader, or don't really have a coordinated stance at the moment, it seems that perhaps people have just gotten out on the streets in frustration. Does this also mean that when we talk about a homemade solution that you were referring to before, we of course also lack the kind of demands or action plan or objectives that perhaps the public wants to see in terms of the kind of change there is? And the actions that Mr. Khalid was earlier mentioning seem more like a knee-jerk reaction and not actual solutions to the core problems that the public is facing. Can we actually hope to see the homemade solution that you were referring to earlier?
Well, I think it will take time. I don't think that you can jump at any systemic solutions in the immediate future. Right now, the goal is to restore stability and to start a dialogue, not to ostracize people who are protesting, not to marginalize them or to demonize them. Of course, there are criminals. Of course, there are gangs which are looting, which are burglarizing, which are engaged in vandalism. But the majority of people who came into the streets of large cities of Kazakhstan are not evil. You know, they want to defend their rights. They want to serve their country. And it's critically important to engage them in the political process and in the social transformation. It will require time. I think a lot will depend on President Tokayev and his team, whether he's able to generate and to demonstrate the political will which is needed. But I think that we should stay hopeful that the situation can get back to normal, and that social and maybe even political reforms will follow.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Andrei Kurtanov, and of course, Mr. Khalid Timur Akram, for being with us on the show and taking the time out for this very important discussion. Yes, Farrukh.
Three very quick interventions. Regarding Facebook, there's a reason I asked this, because it seems that every country in the world now should be worried about what Facebook keeps on doing and how it actually is always at the center of all these instigations, right? Regarding, this country called Kazakhstan, its capital, Nur Sultan, that used to be Astana, and Almaty. It's a beautiful country. The people are beautiful, and really, really heartwarming kind of culture there is. They deserve better. Let us hope in coming days we see progress and betterment without much violence.
Absolutely.
And Russia can also help. Yeah.
And as earlier was mentioned, that there is no leadership of the protesters. So it means that if president or a council of the members of the leaders, existing leaders of the tier 2, if they can give a sort of what the demands are of the protesters, I think there won't be any problem, and I think it will be sorted out.
Absolutely, and as Mr. Kortanov was saying, a large portion of the protesters are not evil, and we really hope that their voices are heard above all the noise that is currently existing in Kazakhstan today. Thank you very much for being a part of the debate. We'll see you tomorrow once again at 9 p.m. only on PTV WORLD.